Hello guys, welcome in this video. In this video we will talk about the anatomy of the smoke solver. And by the anatomy of the smoke solver we mean the gas microsolvers that are used to create a simple smoke solver that is able to handle a simple smoke simulation. We're not going to deal with very complicated things. We're just going to make the most simple or the simplest example of a smoke solver. So before we do this in Houdini, let me explain some of the definitions or the steps that we are going to do in the smoke solver. The first step in a simple smoke solver is called self-advection. And here let's stop a little bit and talk about advection itself. What is the meaning of advection? A smoke simulation is a field-based simulation. This means that everything is volume data. So, for example, the density of the smoke, or if we, for example, draw here our smoke, if this is our smoke here, this smoke here, or the areas where there is smoke, is called density. So for example, if our smoke is denser here, is denser in this area, here we will have higher density. But if it's, for example, here less dense, here we will have less density. So this density is going to represent our smoke. So if we talk about density later, this means that we are talking about the smoke itself. We are representing our smoke as this density, and this density is a field. This means that it is composed of voxels. It's a volume or a volumetric data, so it's just voxels like this, and each of these voxels have values. If the value is higher, this means that this density is, or this means that the smoke is denser at this area. So this is called the density field. So we are going to create our simulation as fields. So we are going to create the density field, the velocity field, and also other fields like pressure field, divergence, and we are going to talk about all of these, and also the temperature. And all of these fields are going to be volumetric data. So they are going to be composed of voxels like this. Returning now to the meaning of advection, if we have a field like this, and this is, for example, our density field, each of these voxels have values. So for example, if this voxel has a value of 2 and this voxel has a value of 1, the meaning of advection is movement of the values with the velocity field. So we have the velocity field that defines the speed and the direction of movement of our smoke, for example. So the velocity field is going to look, for example, something like this. It's just a vector field, so it means that we have here vectors with magnitude. So suppose that this is our velocity field, and this velocity field is just the vectors that will determine the direction and the speed of our smoke. So here, for example, at this voxel, you have your velocity field like this, looking like this. So this means that our smoke at this area should move in this direction, should move here at this direction, should here move at this direction, Okay, so the advection is just this movement, the movement of the values or the smoke according to our velocity field. So here we have a density of 2, okay, and we want to move the density. We said that our smoke is just this density field. We want to move this density. So here at this voxel, this 2 here should move upward here like this. So this is the meaning of advection. We are moving the values according to your velocity field. So for example, the density value here should move here. So if it is 4 here, in the next frame it will move here, so this voxel will have a value of 4. So if we now simulate or see what will happen in the next frame, and for example here we have 3 and here we have 2, here we have 1, this 1 will move here, this 2 will move here, and this 3 will move here. So the result is going to be 3 with the value of 3 here, and the value of 2 here, and a value of 1 here. And this is just a simple explanation. We are moving the values of the field according to our velocity. This is just the meaning of advection. So let me now explain how advection happens in Houdini. Actually, advection in Houdini happens in a backward direction or backward in time. So for example, if we here have the velocity field like this, and here we have a density of 1, Houdini doesn't take the value of 1 and move it like this, but it does the opposite. So for example, in frame 1, we had here a value of 2 and a value of 1, and we had our velocity like this. Let me draw the same drawing here in frame 2. So if this is frame 2, like this, okay, if this is frame 2, what happens in the next frame, okay, is that at each voxel here, for example at this voxel, we had our velocity field like this. It's the same. I want to draw it same. So what will happen is that Houdini will go back with this velocity field. So at frame 2, at this voxel, for example, Houdini will return backward with this velocity vector here. So it will go back. Okay, here at this voxel I can go backward and see in the previous frame or in frame 1, this value of this voxel was I want to see the place of the value of this voxel at the previous frame. So at frame 2 here, if we go backward with this velocity vector, let me change the color. I want a different color. So if we go back, Houdini will say, oh yeah, this value here in the previous frame was at this voxel. And what was the value of this voxel at the previous frame? It was 1. So Houdini will say, okay, it was 1, so I'm going to assign 1 here to this voxel. So I think now you get it. You are, instead of moving the value, you can go backward you can go backward here using your velocity field at time and say, okay, in the previous frame, where was the value of this voxel? So for example, let me take this voxel here, okay, and if the velocity field was like this, okay, I'm in frame 2, so I'm going to say at frame 1, where was the value of this voxel? So I want to go back in time and see. And when I go back in time and see, oh, the value of this voxel was at this voxel here, was here. And what was the value of this voxel at the previous frame? For example, if the value of this voxel at the previous frame was 4, okay, Houdini will assign 4 to the current frame. It's the same as, you know, if you are moving with a car, for example. Suppose that this is a car, and you are moving through stations. So this was station 1 and this is station 2. Okay, and from station 1 you took something with you, you took some maybe apples with you. So you took 2 apples here with you and you moved to the next station here. So instead of taking the 2 apples and moving to the next station, you can here, someone here can wait for you. Someone here can wait for you at the second station and call you at the phone and asks you, hey, how many apples did you have? How many apples did you have from the first station? And you will answer, okay, I had 2 apples from the first station. So now this person will deduce that you are going to have you are going to arrive or reach the second station with 2 apples. And this is what happens. So also in frame 3, for example, Houdini will go backward with the velocity of each frame of each voxel, and will search for the value of the previous frame. Okay, Houdini, for example, let me draw frame 3. For each of these voxels, Houdini will go backward in time with the velocity field. And for example, if this is your velocity field, Houdini will go backward and see, yeah, this value of this voxel was supposed to be at this place here in the previous frame. Okay, this is frame 3. So in frame 3, okay, the value of this current voxel here was supposed to be at this voxel here in frame 2. Okay, and what was the value of this voxel at frame 2? It was 3. So yeah, I'm going to be 3. This is what happens. This is just simply without any complications. It's just you know, reversing the process. Instead of moving from frame 2, taking the value of frame 2 and moving it forward, we can wait at frame 3 and see, okay, where was I at, where was the value of the current voxel, where was the value of this current voxel in the previous frame? It was there, it was at this voxel. So yeah, I was 2 in this voxel, the value was 2 in this voxel in the previous frame, but it should move here to this voxel. Okay, and this is the expectation. Okay, I just reversed the process. I went back in time, and so where was I and instead of moving forward from the previous frame to the current frame. I hope the idea is this idea is clear. Okay, so this is the advection. So we now advected the density with the velocity field, and we will also advect all of our fields with the velocity field. Okay, so not only the density, and we will also advect the velocity field with the velocity field. So we are going also to move the velocity according to the velocity. And actually, this is called self-advection because we are advecting the velocity itself. And this is very intuitive. You are moving the velocity with the velocity because everything is moving. So we should move all of the fields, even the velocity itself. And this is going to be our first step. Okay, let me delete all of these things here. So our next step is going to be going to be buoyancy and viscosity. Okay, so the buoyancy is just the floating force. So to cut it short, the buoyancy is just the force that makes the hotter smoke rise upward. So the more you get your smoke temperature, or the hotter your smoke is, the more it's going to go upward. Okay, so this is just the buoyancy. And we achieve the buoyancy force in Houdini by using the gas buoyancy node. Okay, so this buoyancy just goes upward in the opposite direction of the gravity. And when you are just creating a temperature field, as we said, and this temperature field is going to be used by this buoyancy force to make your smoke float upward. Okay, and the viscosity is how much viscous your smoke is going to be. For example, when you talk about liquids, honey is more viscous than water. Okay, so for the smoke, you can make your smoke look viscous, and you achieve this by the gas blur node. So to be able to understand this, if we have our smoke here coming like this, if we want to achieve more viscous effect or make our smoke more viscous, and let's talk about the less viscous smoke first. If this is not a viscous smoke, it's something less viscous or zero viscosity smoke, it's going to be dynamic. So the velocity vectors are going to be looking in different directions, in the different voxels like this. Okay, but if we want to make this less viscous smoke more viscous, we will want to minimize the difference between these velocity vectors. Okay, so if you, for example, let's talk about water, and you have water. This is, let me draw it in blue. If this is just some water here pouring onto a surface like this. So this is just water. It's going to hit the surface and going to spread like this, okay? But if you, on the other hand, have some honey that hits the surface, it is not going to spread, it's going to get more rigid and clumped, and it's going to be more viscous. So what is the difference between this and this? Here, when the water hits the surface, you have your velocity vectors going in this direction and in this direction, okay? And the difference between the velocity vectors is too much, okay? It's a big difference here because the water is going to spread in all the directions. It's going, you know, when the water hits or when you spill some water, it spreads in all directions. But here, in the case of honey, the velocity vectors are not going to be so much different. The viscosity effect will minimize the difference between the velocity vectors, and this is going to minimize the spreading motion of our honey. Okay, so I just want to draw it. So if this is your viscous fluid, and when it hits the surface, it didn't spread so much. It just made the circle. This is because there is going to be more viscosity, and this viscosity is going to minimize the difference between the velocity vectors. It's firstly going to spread, but because we have viscosity, the difference between these spreading velocity vectors is going to be much less, okay, in the next frames until your honey stops spreading, okay? So this is an old simulation that I did using viscous fluids. It's something more viscous like honey, and as you can see here, it's not spreading like water. It gets clumped and it's more viscous like this. And what I want you to see is that firstly, here the honey here tries to spread, but the velocity vectors, which firstly was spreading in different directions to make the honey spread, will get blurred, and the difference between these velocity vectors is going to be minimized, okay? And they are also going to be reduced, okay, until they become zero and it nearly stops spreading. So this is the effect of viscosity, okay? If you have spreading velocity fields, you are going to blur them, you are going to minimize the difference. So for example, these two neighboring here, one was looking like this and one was looking like this, so we are going to blur them gradually. So in the next frame, both of them will look at this direction, and they are also going to be reduced due to the blurring effect. So they are going to be reduced, and these two are going to be blurred and reduced, okay, until your liquid or your fluid, and here your smoke, for example, is going to stop, or you are going to achieve the viscosity effect. I know that this thing here is hard to understand, but blurring is just reducing your velocity strength, and sort of reducing the difference between the velocity vectors in the different voxels to reach the viscous effect. The third thing that we are going to do is enforcing boundaries. So what are boundary conditions? We have two types of boundary conditions in our simple smoke solver. The first one happens when your smoke, for example, if you have your smoke here like this, and your smoke hits an object, for example, there is an interaction between this object and the smoke at this area here. So you have a boundary area between your smoke and sphere here at this area. So how you are going to deal with this, and actually we are not going to get into the complexity of this, okay. So Houdini deals with this with a gas microsolver that we are going to talk about, okay. It's called gas enforced boundary. This node deals with this type of boundaries between, or the edge here between the smoke and your collision object. But also you have different type of boundaries which happens with the advection. We said that we go, okay, we here go back in time with our velocity vectors. But what if this was the boundary of our field, and at this voxel, for example, when we get back in time, we reach a point here outside the boundaries of our field here. So this is our density field. If we go back in time and reach a point here outside our volume or our field here, what we are going to do, and actually Houdini deals with this by a parameter called border type that we are going to see at each field that we create. You have three options. You have streak, you have constant, and you have repeat. So what is the difference? Okay, so when you go back here and find yourself outside the boundaries, okay, where you don't have values, what we are going to do, okay, so you have three options. The first one here, this streak option, just will find the nearest edge, or the nearest voxel here at the edge. So the nearest point here to this is this voxel here, so it's going to take the value of this voxel and assign it to the next frame. And this constant here means that the value of this voxel will not change, okay. It will take the same value here of this voxel, okay. And this repeat means that it will take the value of the voxel here at the opposite edge. So it will take the value of this voxel here. So you have three options when you go back in time to see where was I in the previous frame. Okay, and sometimes this happens, you don't find yourself at any voxel, you find yourself outside your boundaries, and this happens because the velocity fields are not so regular, and sometimes you find yourself, due to the noise of the velocity field, you find yourself outside your boundaries of your simulation and your field. So what you are going to do, you are either going to take the value of the nearest voxel, and this is called streak, or you are going to stay with the same value of your voxel here, which is constant here. So if this is 2, okay, we're going to stay at 2 in the next frame. But at the streak, you are going to take the value of this voxel, okay, and the repeat means that you are going to take the value of the voxel at the opposite side. So this is just the boundaries. And also, after enforcing the boundaries, we are also going to enforce incompressibility. And by incompressibility, I mean, for example, if you have a water bottle, okay, if this is a bottle, and you try to compress it with your hands, and you have water inside it, it's not going to be compressed. And this happens because fluids are incompressible. And what a fluid is, okay, a fluid is something that takes the shape of the container. So when you put some water in a pot like this, it takes the shape of the pot. When you blow a balloon with air, the air takes the shape of the balloon. So this is just the fluid. So smoke is fluid, water is fluid, and all of this stuff needs to be incompressible, because if they are not incompressible, the simulation is not going to be realistic. Okay, so this incompressibility here, we need to enforce it, and to do this we use the divergence, we use the pressure and the velocity fields. And actually this is so much complicated, but it is just achieved in Houdini by a node called gas project non-divergent. And this divergence, we are going to talk about the zero divergence fields, but actually without talking about this now, the incompressibility just ensures that your divergence field is going to be zero at each voxels. And we are going to talk about divergence later, and we're not going to talk about this now. Okay, so you just force the incompressibility, and this makes your simulation more realistic. You just here ensure that your divergence is 0, okay, and you use the pressure and the divergence fields for that. And after you achieve your 0 divergence, you apply this to the velocity of your smoke, and this changes your smoke. Okay, after enforcing the boundaries and the incompressibility, you just advect the other fields with the velocity. So you have now the temperature, the divergence, the pressure, and all of these fields, and the density, you advect them with your velocity. So the first thing was that you have the velocity with your velocity, then you applied the buoyancy and the viscosity effect. The buoyancy was gas buoyancy, the viscosity is just blurring the velocity fields with the gas blur. Okay, and also here you can apply any external force at this stage, any other external force, gravity or anything. Okay, Then you enforce the boundaries or the boundary conditions, either with collisions using the gas enforced boundary conditions, or using the border type when you go with the advection and see yourself outside your boundaries. Okay, and we talked about this. Then you advected all of the fields with your velocity field, and if you want to add uh, you know temperature, diffusion effect. So when your smoke is hot and it's going into the air, when your smoke is hot and going into the air, your temperature of the smoke is going to diffuse. It's going to diffuse, okay, and it's going to be less and less by time. And this makes your smoke finally stops floating at some point, okay, because it's not going to have the same temperature. It's going to lose its temperature by time until it stops floating, okay, and this is called temperature diffusion. You are losing your temperature, by time, okay, and this causes your smoke to stop spreading at some time, okay. It's going to spread at some time at the to the air, okay. And you can do this by also the gas blur, and we said that this minimize the difference and reduce, so it's going to minimize the difference of the temperature at each voxel. So the neighboring voxels are going to have similar temperature, and it will reduce the temperature by time. So this simulates the effect of losing the temperature by time, and this will cause your smoke to simulate the real life effect. When you, for example, see a fire or something and you have your smoke going up into the air, you find the smoke stops spreading at some time and dissipates, okay, and this is by the temperature diffusion, okay. And if you want your smoke to dissipate after it stops spreading, or by dissipation I mean gradually decay, you can use also a node called gas dissipate to reach this effect, okay. So this is what we are going to do. I just wanted to you know sketch everything here before we do it inside Houdini. So we are now going to do all of this inside Houdini. Thank you.